I think we already did the letter. I'll look back. Tomorrow, I have to pull that back.
Yeah, so if we own signatory, you can go to this, you guys want to be involved in it?
We technically put it past the roads, so I don't think we've ever had this situation before.
Yeah.
Where we-
So we have another situation. What about like there's other situations, people that, you know, it's a city hall, but it's sure signal. Yeah, so we wanted to change this. We'll look at changing the configuration now. That should be discussed, STC.
Claire, whenever you're ready, let me know.
At least it's review.
Intern.
Whose signal is that Memorial and? What is it?
Memorial what?
Who is the?
Memorial and Exchange, that, you know, the one that's been out for a while?
So that's,
I put it in 311. That's their signal.
Yeah, oil exchange.
It hasn't been doing anything for a bit.
Okay. We're gonna get started. The other day kind of this was really hard. You guys didn't really start with some like. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. We are going to open the our meeting of the North Main Street Task Force. I am Samantha Blott, chairwoman of the task force and city councilwoman for Ward 3. Folks, could you please take the roll?
Chair Angela.
And here.
Vice Chair Kavigian.
here.
Lieutenant Brown.
Here.
Marissa Lopes is absent. Rachel Peterson.
I'm here.
Peter Camara.
Here.
Thomas Badway.
Here.
Sarah Engel.
Here.
Jessica Lance.
Here.
Nate Urso.
Here.
Sean Raymond.
Here.
Rosie Jaswell.
Here.
We have 11 present and 1 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Before we read the first item on the agenda, I'm just gonna mention a few quick things. One is we do have 2 main agenda items, and we won't go as late as last time, I promise. I know people have to sleep after these meetings. There is a sign-in sheet over there. Claire, should I pass it around so folks can sign in?
Is there anyone who hasn't signed in to speak?
I have, sorry.
Oh, no, to speak. You mean?
It's for the public.
Yeah, it's for the public, so if
Yeah,
the
for the
public
public.
wants to speak, they can use the sign-in sheet. Last time we were people behind and stuff. Thank you, Clary, fast. And we'll also have time for public comment at the end, so there'll be more opportunities to sign in. We just want to make sure that we
Yeah.
get everybody.
And we have extra copies of the PowerPoints.
And we have extra copies of the PowerPoints over there as well. They'll also be on the screen. A few quick notes. One is, so we'll have public comment at the end. I know that people sometimes have questions and things about the presentations, and so we will also, after the way it'll work, after task force members have a chance to ask questions and have conversation, if there are questions about presentations, we'll open it for public comment. And I'm gonna call on folks. A lot of city council meetings don't have any public comment, which I don't think is great democracy, but I do want to make sure that everybody on the task force has a chance to get heard. And that there's like nobody's talking over anybody else. So I just want to say that at the beginning. For task force members also, when it's time for conversation, if you could just like raise your hand, because last time there were a few people who kept trying to jump in and couldn't because the conversation is flowing, and I can see you all, but you can't all see each other based on the angle. So if you can just like, that sounds so like, I know it sounds like grade school, but I just want to make sure that we get talked over and that everybody has a chance. And I will reiterate how much I appreciate you all for being here and all the great work that's happening. Claire, would you mind, Claire, can you read item 1 into the agenda? I mean, into the meeting, into the record, whatever.
Updates on actions taken since the last meeting.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to provide a few updates and then leave some time for other folks to have any updates that have happened, because I know some action has already been taken, which is really great. One is, and I want to thank Annalise, who's on the Zoom. We've talked before about how there have been a number of past North Main Street reports over the past 15 to 20 years. Annalise, who is a Ward 3 resident, had copies of all of them for the last 20 years and gave them to me. And so I have copies of them on my phone, and we'll be have read through them, and I'll make sure that they're accessible to folks. I haven't had a chance to kind of like share them around yet, but that was amazing. And so thank you to Annalise for keeping meticulous records of what's happened over the last 20 years. So we can learn from that. And unsurprisingly, there's been a lot of consensus over the last 20 years about some of the actions we've taken. So that's one update. The second is a thank you to RIDOT, intersection of North Main Street and Rochambeau, the pedestrian light has been updated. Sean, I don't know if you, no pressure, I can also say it, but if you want to say what the change was.
Yeah, last week, we had our maintenance forces implement the exclusive pedestrian phase there. You know, we're calling it a pilot. It's the one intersection along that corridor that isn't coordinated with the other signals. So we thought that'd be a good kind of test to see how it operates, and then hopefully, I haven't heard anything negative about it at this point.
I think people are only positive things. People are being like, I can cross the street. Like, it's been really exciting.
So
Yeah.
good to hear.
Yeah. And then two other updates, and then I'll open it to others. So this morning, the mayor, council president, and I announced a partnership to commit the city to something called Vision Zero, which is a commitment to have zero traffic fatalities or major injuries by 2030 with immediate implementation to get there. And so we'll be working together across various city agencies as well as across the administration and the council, the two of the branches of the government, to really make that happen. And I think that'll have impacts on North Main Street as well. So it's related, it's not part of this task force, but it is related to this initiative. And I guess I don't want to put you on the spot, Sean. Did you want to talk about the road safety assessment, or is that we talked about that at the meeting?
No, we can talk about that now. So another thing that we have planned is to perform the road safety assessment. You know, I mentioned at the last meeting. I'll be sending out an email tomorrow to the task force members, inviting them, just polling when everyone's availability will be. But I think we're shooting for very early April to actually conduct the road safety assessment. So we know the weather is slightly turning and won't be snow on the ground. And as part of that, you know, we already have the consultant gathering a lot of information, a lot of traffic volume data, streetlight data in terms of like what origin destinations, things like that. And yeah, those previous studies would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll send those along. Yeah.
So so we're getting a jump on it in terms of getting the consultant prepared. So the email will go out tomorrow, and yeah, we'll get that scheduled.
Excellent. Awesome. Does anyone else have any updates they'd like to give of action or things that have happened since our last meeting related to North Main Street? Yes.
I'll provide an update. So I wanted everyone to be aware that the planning department has been working tirelessly over the past few weeks to put together an application to the USDOT RAISE grant program. And we had one idea originally, given everything that's been going on North Main Street, and talking to the administration, we decided to take the concepts from the North Main Street plan and make that the basis of our RAISE planning grant. So a planning grant is money to do design and engineering, community outreach and engagement to determine what a new North Main Street could look like. We don't have any plans right now that are past any sort of like very concept. My hope is that this task force would be the main sort of community engagement and outreach focus of the task force or of the grant process if we do get it, with all of the other kinds of engagement that we do in our normal planning processes. Applications are due next week. I'm planning to have a whole draft done by the end of this week so that we can get everything submitted. Thank you to those of you who have provided letters of support, right out Ripta, council, Jamie, on behalf of the task force and others. I think that'll be a strong application.
Thank you so much, Jess. And I just want to also emphasize, and I know I've talked to folks on the task force, that I'm excited this is like a planning grant that you can have with, like, if it realizes, like, it's an opportunity to like think about it, like, you know, final decisions should be made. This isn't like this exact design is happening, but this would give us the resources to like actually really put in that planning effort. I know that there's lots of thoughts around the table about what that could look like, so I'm glad that we have this table to have that conversation.
And just to give a timeline, so applications are due next week. DOT expects announcements in late June of this year. It usually takes around a year to get grant agreements from USDOT. So if we were awarded the grant, we would know in June of 2024, we probably wouldn't have a grant agreement until June of 2025. And then that's when we would be getting a consultant on board and doing, you know, kicking off the project. And then I would expect at least a year, maybe two, to go through the whole process. So we would be doing all of the permitting and everything for whatever comes out of the design process going up there so that we can get the construction documents. And then from there, we would work with our partners to figure out funding for construction.
Awesome. Yeah, Nate.
I don't know what the time frame for the RSA, but would that be helpful to?
So
with that?
I'm writing in the narrative for the grant that RIDOT is going to be doing that, and we'll be using a lot of the information from the RSA to inform the design going forward, if we get it.
It's a really great point. Mhm. So. Yeah, Jane.
I wanted to just make sure that we acknowledge that another pedestrian was hit by a car at the Rochambeau intersection about a week and a half ago.
And it was before.
And this was before this change, and I think that change will make a huge difference for exactly that kind of incident. So thank you for that. But I want to make sure that we're mindful of acknowledging these things when they happen, because that's a lot of the reason why they're here.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jane. Yeah, Lieutenant Brown.
And thank you, you reached out to me when that happened, so, I can definitely, serious accidents, that type of thing, usually the committees put out emails, so I'll be alerted to it when I'm not even at work, and I can share some of that stuff with you. We started, targeted enforcement back in November. I didn't track the data as well as I should have in the first few weeks, and it was slow. But I can tell you that since 12/31, which is the first calendar week of this year, up until 3 o'clock today, we've got 690 moving violations on Main Street. Some arrests, we haven't really focused on that. We've got some data. I just got some of it emailed to me today. I might ask somebody from traffic to come to the next meeting
Oh, that'd be
and
amazing.
explain it, because some of so those message boards, if you've seen them out there, it looks like they're not working. I specifically asked that they not flash a message, because they told me they could do that.
Yeah.
So it collects data and nobody thinks that they're working. So you get more real time.
Yes, actually.
So that came to me in a data dump today, a lot to digest. It's a little not super clear when we read it. But I think maybe that's something we should talk about for the next meeting.
That'd be great.
But I can give you some examples. So this past full calendar week was the best week for activity with that. We did 140 violations, the week before 110, the week before 99. So it's getting better.
Yeah.
I'm being more selective about who I have to do that. Some people love traffic more than others. I mean, it's just the nature of the job.
Yeah.
But it's gonna take a while. In terms of speed, most of what we're getting for violations is in the low 40s to low 50s. That gap, we've got a couple outliers. I think the guys have said to me, the highest speed that they captured was 63.
Oh, wow.
So they're out there. I mean, we're not generally doing this in the middle of the night. It's mostly the visitor hours,
Yeah.
and definitely the one you can do that's not. These are different stuff.
Okay.
Speed. We'll see how, we'll report back to you next month and how it's going. It's to the point where it's affecting the courts right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we need to remember time that they're just.
That's actually, oh, wow. Well, thank you for yes. Awesome. So I want to, unless anyone else has any big updates, I respect that we have a visitor today, which I'm really excited about. So just looking around. But also want to acknowledge, it's a lot of updates for the last couple of weeks. So great job, everybody. Like things are really happening and I'm really, really pleased and really happy with the engagement. And I do have one. I also want to thank Annalisa for coming. She runs the North Barrow Ground. As you know, North Barrow Ground is a huge portion of North Main and just a wonderful asset for us to have in the community. I believe it's older than the city of Providence and like contains so much of our history. It's also a wonderful open space. Coyotes live there, you guys. They're adorable, but don't touch them. Leave the space. Be glad they're there. Keep your cats inside. But it's a wonderful resource for the community and it's a significant percentage of North Main Street. So I would love if we could read agenda item 2 into the record, and then we'll invite Annalisa to speak.
Discussion and presentation about North Burial Ground. Invited speaker, Annalisa Hepner, Director, North Burial Ground Cemetery.
And before you get going, everybody has copies of her presentation. And I believe I need to enter these into the record. I'm looking at Claire to make sure I'm not lying. So can I have a motion to, what exhibit number is this?
Did you do North Burial Ground?
I don't think we continued on. I think it was just each meeting was 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah, perfect. And can I have a motion to enter this as exhibit 1?
Motion to enter this exhibit 1.
Excellent. Motion made, excellent by Sarah. All in favor? Cool. Anybody opposed? Okay, cool. Excellent. So Annalisa, take it away. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, everybody. So I'm Annalisa Hebner. I'm the city cemetery director. I actually have a really funny job title because I'm the city cemetery director, but by ordinance, I'm also the sexton of North Burial Ground. So I have this very long, old-fashioned job title. I'm going to first apologize. I talk really fast, so if I'm like too fast, let me know. I will also get winded because I'm pregnant and she's sitting on my diaphragm, so I may have to stop and do like a. So,
Do you need me to help with the?
yeah, okay, good. All right, this is just North Burial Ground. That's our meeting Zoom. I included this picture. So this is the marble steps. These were built in 1898, and I included this picture not because we're really going to talk about the marble steps, but because this is like a fun historic glance of North Main Street and Cemetery Street. So it's kind of fun to see North Main as a really different concept than what we have it as now. I also love our like wooden picket fence. I think it's really fun. So that's neat. This is also the same marble as the marble in the State House. So kind of neat. And that's what it looks like today. A little less shiny brand. Yeah. But you know, that's what it is. Okay, so most people don't know that the city of Providence actually runs North Burial Ground, nor that there is a city job called city cemetery director. So very quickly, what does cemetery director do? And where do you kind of sit in the city of Providence? So I'm part of the Parks Department. So my boss is Wendy Nelson, the superintendent of parks. And the biggest part of my job is to be North Burial Ground and our other city cemeteries advocate, both in the Parks Department and in the city overall. But that also means that I manage all of our day-to-day operations. I take care of our budgets, both our perpetual care fund, our revolving fund, and the shared city costs that we share. I do all of our improvement projects, and then I work with our funeral homes, monument companies, other vendors to do the kind of nuts and bolts of running an actual cemetery. Some of the more fun parts of my job, I do a lot of very forward-facing customer service and constituent relations. So I help when there are questions, I help when there's a difficult burial, I help when there's a concern. And then I also get to do a lot of the fun stuff. So I lead most of our tours. I get to share my culture during our Give Those Mics celebration. And I plan all of our programming and manage our community partnerships. So if you have an idea of a program you'd like to see in North Burial Ground, please reach out because we're really at the beginning of our journey as a cultural institution. So if you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them and see what we can make happen. Maybe not this year, I'm going on maternity leave during the peak programming season, so. Yeah. Plan for next year. Yeah. So brief history about North Burial Ground. We were founded in 1700. The first recorded burial that we have is 1711, but if you know anything about kind of colonial American history, things were established based on what they were used for, not things that were established and then they were used by that establishment. So we suspect that there were burials at North Burial Ground before 1700. And the town decided, okay, well, we're already burying people over on the sandhill, so that's the burial ground now. For the first 150 years of the burial ground history, the land use really varied there. So there was burial ground, but it was also kind of Rhode Island didn't have a proper commons like a lot of the Massachusetts colonies did. So instead, this kind of like land on the outskirts of town, which is what North Burial Ground was at the time, was the kind of unpleasant aspects of colonial life. It was the burying ground, it was the stocks, there was a gallows, there was a animal pound. So lots of stuff. Since its inception, it has reflected Rhode Island's value of anybody is welcome here, which is paraphrasing. And, you know, I think one of the fun things to inquire about at North Burial Ground is like, how successful was Rhode Island about that mission? But we've always been non-denominational, open to everyone, regardless of race, religion, social status. And unlike a lot of early cemeteries, North Burial was actually not formally segregated until the 1850s when it came kind of under the professional, like when the city was founded, then there became actual like different sections for people based on race and religion. We've always maintained a free ground or a potter's field or stranger's vale. They're all three names for different kinds of free or reduced cost burial. Our current Potter's Field is mostly full. We do still do free burial for, stillborns and infants from our local hospitals. The official state free ground is now at a cemetery in Exeter instead. Okay, so we expanded through land purchase, eminent domain, land donations. In your package, there is a very funny typo where I wrote eminent domain instead of eminent. So ignore that. That was a pregnancy brain. We're gonna blame it on that. We also absorbed a lot of smaller burial grounds and family burying grounds into North Burial Ground. So you'll see the Quaker burying ground, which moved to another place, West Burial Ground moved to another place, and they're all kind of at North Burial Ground now. 1840s to 1910, when the city became the city, the first two mayors were actually very gung-ho about transforming the burial ground from a primitive burial ground, which is the language they used about it, into a proper garden cemetery. That comes from a couple of places. One is new kind of Victorian and Edwardian concepts of sanitation and what a city is supposed to do, like public health wise, but also because, as you folks probably know, we have a very lovely neighbor just right around the corner, Swan Point Cemetery, which was a private garden cemetery where all of a sudden everybody who was buried at North Burial Ground was suddenly choosing Swan Point. So the city was like, well, wait a minute, we got to make this nicer. So there was pretty significant investment in North Burial Ground during that time period. And then over the next 200 or so years, that was kind of a wave. We have like periods of really intense investment. And then like many other city institutions, periods of what we call divestment, basically. In the 30s, there were quite a few WPA projects in the burial ground, which was great. And then until very recently, the last real influx of investment in North Burial Ground really happened in the 40s. So we're kind of coming off one of those periods of, well, it's there, and not much else. Okay, so we're talking about Randall Park really fast. I won't read this slide. Randall Park is a strip of land that faces North Main. And everybody's really familiar with Randall Park because there's lots of discussion about how Randall Park should be used. Randall Park was deeded to the city as a result of an 1876 lawsuit by the heirs of the William Randall family. What happened was there was a city surveyor who made some promises he shouldn't have, and then also implied to the Randalls that all of North Main Street and a big chunk of North Burial Ground is actually built on Randall land. So the Randalls got everybody together that they're all their descendants and sued the city. There was a lot of back and forth. Basically, a task force, kind of like this one, was assembled to figure out what to do about all of this. And basically, they gave the Randalls and their descendants $10,000 in 1881 money, and then made some deals to protect that land. So what happened was the portion of land that they kind of mutually decided was maybe Randall land at one point was to be given to the city in a burial ground with a stipulation that no burials can take place, that the land should be planted planted with trees and or otherwise beautified as soon as convenient to the city, and that it exists as a land bank for the expansion of North Main Street. So a lot of this discussion actually happened because North Main was kind of transforming from a regional highway, like a kind of like it moved everybody between Providence and Pawtucket and points north to the main thoroughfare through Providence and northwards. So there's more restrictions on Randall Park in some ways than I think people imagine, and then also fewer in some ways. But basically, if you want to use this wide North Main, all good. If you want to plant trees or beautify it, all good. Anything else, not really available as an option. So it's definitely a more specific place than I think the community thinks. The other thing too is that it's smaller than this is the description of the extent of Randall Park, which we have lost some of that to that North Main expansion. Basically, the first thing that happened after the 1881 agreement was expansion of North Main. So that's a quick the quick and dirty history on it. Reading the records about this is very funny if you ever have a chance, because it's great old timey lawsuit language, so it's really fun. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about North Burial Ground's mission and kind of what we're doing now and what we're doing going forward. North Burial Ground has a 3-part mission to memorialize the deceased, to comfort the living, and to serve as a historical destination for the community. So what does memorialize the deceased mean, and who are the deceased that we're memorializing at North Burial Ground? This is data from our last year of burials. The average age of death of somebody who's being buried at North Burial Ground is 67.9, which is about 10 years younger than the average lifespan of your wider Rhode Island population. We got this information from something called a burial transit. When a body comes to North Burial Ground, you get a copy of a record from the coroner's office saying that this body is who it is, and it has demographic information about the individual on that transit. So overall, 60% of the deceased at North Burial Ground are of a non-white identity. Those are self-reported or family-reported ethnicity like choices that people make when they're filling out their certificates. So, it's a largely Black and Latino population that we serve at MBG right now. And then I also was really interested in like who in Providence and our neighboring cities really do use North Burial Ground. So one of the things that the coroner's office collects is the last place of residence for each deceased person. So we've got like kind of top 5 zip codes are 02907, 02904, 02860, 02908, and 02909, which is my neighborhood. So that's fun. So just kind of like a quick picture of who is our current basically constituent profile, who are the families and who are the deceased that we're caring for now. That's changed over time, right? Like you see that it kind of, if you were to do this, like really zoom out, you would see a demographic trend that I think will map pretty closely to demographic trends of the city, which I think is really interesting. So some of the changes that we've made kind of under our Memorialize the Deceased mission is thinking about culturally responsive memorialization rules and regulations. So every cemetery sets their own rules about what they think the cemetery should look like. We have started shifting the norms from our burial ground and shifting the rules and regulations to allow people to decorate their graves brightly, to put objects or mementos on their grave sites. This is a new thing, honestly. Like, there used to be a pretty strict, only fresh flowers, that's all that's allowed. But that's not what our constituents really want. And I'm Mexican, and in our culture, we are bright grave decorators. So it doesn't look odd to me. I get a lot of feedback that maybe that looks odd or off-putting or different, but it's just a new norm, I think, for who we're serving in North Burial Ground. We changed our cleanup schedule to one that's actually, I just copied completely from where my family is buried in California, which is you do the monthly, you put up a sign at the beginning of the month, you do the cleanup at the end of the month, and everybody starts to recognize what that pattern is. So it's less of a surprise, all of the things I left behind for my kid are gone, and it's more like, okay, you know what's coming. And then we're also allowing longer and larger graveside services. So the first, in our original rules, it was 30 minutes to the graveside, you're in, you're out. But we regularly see, and I think specifically because we bury so many young people, we see big processions. So we have like funerals that will come in with over 100 cars. We see that probably once a week. As folks are shifting away from really organized faith communities, we see more of the funeral taking place at North Burial Ground versus a service in a church, and then you go to the graveside, and the graveside is the kind of small thing that you do with close friends and family, like this is the main thing. So as a result, we do fewer services a day, but we do have, I think, a higher impact for the friends and family of the deceased. I think it means a lot to be able to be there. And then we've also there's two people that work in the office, one is me and one is my office coordinator, and that office coordinator position is a 1033 position that is a bilingual preference, so we have employees that speak fluent Spanish, fluent Portuguese, and English at the fairground to make sure that we're accommodating people in the language that they feel most comfortable dealing with a difficult topic in. Okay, so cover the living sounds a lot like memorializing the deceased, but it's a little bit different, and here's how we interpret that. The big one is keeping North Burial Ground as a burial ground in perpetuity. So that's how we're written. We are supposed to exist in perpetuity. We are supposed to be a burial ground forever. A lot of our clients come to us and they say, well, what happens after 5 years? And the answer is nothing. Once you're here forever. And there's a lot of security in that for our families. That also means that sometimes I have a difficult job of pushing back on ideas that shift the goals of North Burial Ground away from being a burial ground. So before my time and throughout my time, there were like lots of ideas proposed for what could happen at the burial ground, like a skate park and wood storage and playgrounds, or I don't know, let's just leave all the old vehicles at the burial ground. So part of my job is saying, no, we can't do that. This is the burial ground. This is what we're for. 1700 on, it will always be this. That also means that choosing programming and partnerships that reflect a historical or cultural lens, focus on the environment, or based in memorialization. So even at Halloween, which is like the time that people think of burial grounds, we lean away from spooky. Everything is really based in history. And we don't do like ghost hunts or goth nights or any sort of programming that's flippant about what a burial ground is. We do our programming on non-burial days, so you'll see a lot of after-hours programs or programs on Sundays, because we don't bury on Sunday. And we also, to be totally frank, we prioritize our burials over casual visitors or programs or anything else that happens at North Burial Ground. So our main mission is the burial ground, and that means that, you know, if I have something really exciting planned that I'm stoked about, that we're bringing a program, and it turns out that we've got to do, especially children's burials that day, then we cancel the program and we pick the burial every time. And then that also means that we are here to maintain North Burial Ground's natural built environment to the best of our ability. I say that North Burial Ground is 110 or 113 acres, depending on who you survey with. We have 5 grounds crew members to do all those burials. So we do 200 to 250 a year. And then also all the mowing, all the leaf mulching, all the pavement patching, all that, 5 guys. And then the other part of my job is making sure that North Burial Ground is safe from hate, I hate to say it, hate crimes, vandalism, other dangerous after-hour activity. We recently in January had somebody coming in after hours and burning crosses at North Burial Ground. So these things are real. And that's why a lot of times you'll see sometimes our pedestrian gates will be open 24/7, sometimes our pedestrian gates will close. And if they're closed, it's usually because there's been something going on. So this is just a quick map of the burial ground to give people an idea of where we are. It's not a great map, it's hard to get the whole thing on a map slide. There is another pedestrian gate here, and that's also a vehicle gate that we don't use it very much. Okay, so, you know, I'm saying that since the 40s, there hasn't really been any money coming into North Burial Ground. That's changing, yay! So we received a really nice portion of SIP funds for the next 2 years. First year, $750,000, the second year, $500,000. And I want to talk a little bit about what we're thinking of doing with those funds. None of these plans are formal. None of these plans are set in stone. These are all still kind of works in progress. So one of them is Cemetery Street fencing and the formal entrance along Cemetery Street. So there is a vehicle gate there already. It's got 2 pedestrian gates on either side. It's right across from Collier Field. It's like kind of like that pedestrian gate that I didn't label on the map is back there. What we really like to do is see that transformed into kind of North Burial Ground's north entrance. So Right now, when you come in for a funeral, there's really only the main gates. We're also burying people basically in one small section right in the front. And then, so we bury people here. And then also back here, because these were lots that were purchased in basically the 50s and 60s. So now the owners of those lots are starting to pass away, or their descendants are still using them. So these are kind of our two areas of focus. So what we would really like to do is see this section here. This gate here transformed so that we can welcome funerals that are burying in this section through those back gates and have that be a nice experience. If you've seen that gate or that fence line right now, it is there's like real stratigraphy of like fence line going on back there, and like we've got some really rusty old stuff. There's some nicer fence, but it's all chain link. We want to replace that with, unfortunately, not with the wrought iron. That's very expensive. Wrought iron fencing is very crazy expensive, but with something that fits a little bit more with the historic character of the burial ground, looks a little bit nicer. We want to put in a basically emergency release gate. We close early at our burial ground. A lot of that is that staffing issue. So what we really like to be able to do is let people get out of the burial ground after we're formally closed and the union staff is gone. So having a one-way exit gate, a lot of cemeteries have those. If you get stuck in, you're not really stuck in. If you get locked in at North Burial Ground in your car, you are locked in at North Burial Ground in your car. So you want to help people avoid that. And then also make those pedestrian gates that are there, like, you know, make them nicer, make it clear that there's a gate there that you actually can use. People don't know about it. They usually go to this one, but this one you have to walk through people's graves to get down into the cemetery. It has a really nice, like, a little entryway. It was a main entrance to the cemetery at one point, so we'd like to see that restored. And then, you know, replanting it, making it look nice, and then installing cameras and lighting to make sure that we kind of keep an eye on what's happening. It's nice too because this entrance kind of directly connects to some of the like early 20th century part of the cemetery too. So there's a pedestrian entrance in the oldest part of the cemetery, and then you have to really hike a bit to get down into the like 1900s, 1920s, and that'll kind of leave that section of the more. Okay, so repaving stormwater management. If you've driven through North Burial Ground, or tried to ride a bike through North Burial Ground, or tried to walk too briskly through North Burial Ground, you may have rolled an ankle or popped a tire, or I mean, bottomed out your car, like rough. That paving was all done as part of the WPA until the 1940s project, and then never redone. So it's old pavement. So the real dream is to kind of remove a lot of the pavement from North Burial Ground. We don't really want cars kind of winding through the oldest sections of the cemetery. The lanes are really narrow. We have people hit headstones all the time. What we would really like to see is arterial paving and then permeable media of some sort as trail pathways through the cemetery, so that you can use them on foot, use them on a bike, but not necessarily take a big old truck through. It's really tough driving anyway. Even just to do that arterial paving around the kind of exterior of the burial ground exceeds the funds we received. Obviously, it's like a $2 million expenditure, so we're not doing that. But we picked about a mile in that northwest section, kind of where we're talking about along the Cemetery Street entrance, where there's really bad flooding and really bad pavement to both repair with whatever's appropriate. So whether that is regrading and repaving along some of the busiest parts and then looking at permeable pavements through the rest of it, that's kind of the goal. And then I don't know if you've been in the burial ground after a storm, it floods. So in the northwest section of North Burial Ground, there is a piece of the Meshastic Creek, and it overflows, and then it also ducks underground in the burial ground. So when you get the water really coming down, the groundwater really swells. So we have like in some sections almost a foot of standing water after a bad storm. We can't do the same kind of stormwater management systems that you would see in Roger Williams Park, because those do require excavation. And what you don't want to do in a historic cemetery where the records didn't start till 1848, but was founded in 1700, is just start digging. Because you're gonna find people. I'll be very frank about that, you'll find people. So, but still thinking about, stormwater planting for resiliency, even just to make it look a little bit less like we've got a big old standing water scenario and more like, oh, well, the first just over there, it's not lovely kind of thing. And then there's also, this right here is really, and it means nothing on this map, but there is a big old highway retaining wall right here, like big highway retaining wall. At the very least, we want to paint that. At the very most, we'd love to see it either as a mural installation or a piece of art that reflects the natural environment of North Burial Ground, or the sections that it kind of bolsters are largely sections that are around free ground. So something that highlights the history and the contributions of Providence's people of color and immigrant communities, which I think would be really cool. That's kind of that's the fun part of the paving project. And then the last little bit of what we would like to do is build an actual scope of work and plan for the adaptive reuse of our receiving tomb. So the receiving tomb was built in 1905. That's this building over here. It was, when it was built, like the nicest, the fanciest, the absolute best receiving tomb in the region. People used it, and then when we're gone and we're buried in different cemeteries, it was like the picture of Edwardian sanitary notions. It was all like pink marble inside, white plaster. It was really, really nice. It was in use until about 1978, and then we stopped using it. We closed it up, and it is kind of disintegrating in place, which is really too bad because it's a really important historical building. Really quickly, for those who don't know, a receiving tomb is before heavy equipment was invented. If you were going to be buried in the wintertime, you died in the wintertime, you had to wait until spring to be buried because you didn't get through the frozen ground. So you would rent a space in the receiving tomb. And then people, because it was really big, also used it to save up funds to buy a lot. So you would rent space in the receiving tomb until your family was able to purchase a grave. What we would like to see it transformed into is a gathering space, an indoor columbarium, and maybe mausoleum spaces. I say maybe mausoleum spaces because they're kind of falling out of trend right now, but we do get occasional inquiries for it, so you know, we can save a few spots maybe. But we'd like to see a restoration of the historic portico, the doors, and receiving parlor, so that you can see kind of what it looked like when it was built, and then we also have that space to be able to have non-graveside services. Like I was saying, people want to have more of the funeral at North Burial Ground anyway, so we should give people a place to do that. We don't have one right now. And then columbaria are where urns are placed. I don't know if people are super familiar with that, but if you are cremated and you're in an urn and you go on a niche in a wall, that is a columbaria. And one of the challenges with a cemetery that is a perpetual cemetery is that you have to find ways to bring money in for as long as you possibly can. And we're running out of space for in-ground burial, so increasing our cremation products is a big part of the long-term sustainability of North Burial Ground. Indoor columbarium are great because you can do these fun glass-fronted ones. And like I mentioned before, our folks at North Burial Ground love a grave decoration, so you can do, you know, mementos in your niche too, instead of just the urn. You can get a really fancy urn and it can be seen. I love them. That's one of my favorite things. And then this is a really big project. So the idea is that we'll then have this plan to be able to seek other funding. So that's what we're thinking for the SIP funds. We're really excited about it. And then because we're talking about North Main, this one is really just like my own kind of pipe dream about what I would like to see Randall Park used for. So there is there's a model from a cemetery in Maryville, Tennessee called Grandview Cemetery. It's called a healing path. And it is the folks who created it describe it as like, you know, those parks where they have the exercise stations, that, but for your mental health and grief journey. So there are basic therapeutic principles. There are different stations with different kind of meditations or tactile activities that you can complete. And it's really adaptable to whatever space you actually have. So they have like a big area for this, and they've done a bunch of things, but like, you know, you get like this, and then what they suggested is that you commission artists from your community to make the tactile piece. You landscape the space with what makes sense for the area that you have, and kind of create this space that can be used for this if you want to, but it's also a beautiful place to visit and use if you don't want to do that. So creating other spaces in a cemetery to visit that isn't just at the graveside is really helpful for families that are in mourning. A lot of times people want to come, they want to engage, but they don't want to be right at the grave. So we have a lot of folks who come in and they park and they sit in their cars, and that's okay. You're always welcome to do that, but you know, giving that kind of other option for how to engage with the burial ground is something that I really like to be able to do. This is just, again, I think it'd be really cool. Okay. Why cemeteries? This is kind of the third part of our mission, and I'll go fast because I know I'm taking a lot of time, but cemeteries make history really real. So when I do tours, especially when I do tours that have kids on them, we talk about the Revolutionary War. And I don't know, fourth graders love George Washington. I don't know if any of y'all have met any fourth graders, but they love George Washington. So when you go to Stephen Hopkins' grave and you say, Stephen Hopkins knew George Washington, the fourth graders are like, whoa. Whoa. And that kind of individual experience with history is right there in a cemetery in a way that it isn't in lots of other places that we think about history. They're a record of our past values, who's remembered, how they're remembered, and why they're remembered. And I'm like an ex-academic, so these kind of questions about like the who and the why and what social structures have created that who and the why are really interesting to me. So I think it's a really fruitful thing to explore. And then, like Councilor Andrew mentioned, our burial ground is also a really amazing green space. It's the second largest green space in the city of Providence. And in addition to we have four coyotes that survived. So we have a mating pair. They had 7 offspring this season, 4 lived. So, 2 lived at the end of it. Well, 2 stayed. 4 of their babies lived. 2 of them were males, so they went, which is what coyotes do. 2 of them were females, so they stayed, which is what coyotes do. We've got muskrats. There's all sorts of birds. We love the coyotes for many reasons, but a big one is rabbit control, because if you would like to see a bunny, come to North Burial Ground. Many bunnies. And then we also have a lot of really cool butterflies and damselflies, and there's a pollinator garden that some volunteers planted in Randolph Park, which is really beautiful. And brings a lot of those fun critters. We also have lightning bugs or fireflies, and there are very few of those in Providence anymore. But you can see them at our burial ground at night. We do night tours, about the moon nights. We do them once a month at the full moon, and right around June, July, you start seeing these little lightning bugs, and it's so exciting. So yeah. We did 52 programs last year. We brought in 1,550 participants, but minus 52 because my mom came to all of them. And I feel like it's not fair to count her every time. She's a nice mom. But anyway, they all fall into those buckets that we talked about. There's kind of something for everyone. We're really in a cooking spaghetti phase of what our programming looks like. So we're seeing what sticks, we're seeing what people love, and I don't know if we're gonna make that 52 this year, but we've got some fun things planned ahead. If you would like to learn more, we do a semi-quarterly email newsletter. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at office Monday through Friday, 8 to 3:45, and then that's our website. And yeah, that's it. That's our favorite now. Thank you.
Okay, so that was one that was amazing. So thank you. I'm like, that was that. So before we open for questions, one, I just have that was awesome. And what a resource to have right in our neighborhood. And so much amazing history. 3 things I wanted to say. One is that Annalisa's been doing such an amazing job in general, and also like expanding all that amazing programming in the burial ground and doing so much amazing history. I've learned a ton from her in the last year. Like bucket list of things I did not expect becoming a city councilor, spending a lot of time in a cemetery, which is now what I do. I've got all my swag, you know, like there all the time. I love it. But she is doing so amazing, and was a real advocate for getting funding from the city for the, improvements she discussed. And two other things, one is, last year we did an Earth Day event at North Fairground, and we'll do that again this year. We're still planning what that looks like, but we'll make sure you all know, because it's a great way to beautify and take care of, amazing thing on the faith. And then before anyone asks in the question time, we are not moving the fence, the wrought iron fence, that currently blocks Randall Park. It would be about, I think, like $1 million.
It's a lot, so that is.
I've heard that so many times, so what a great idea, and also, $1 million is a lot of money, and it was a lot of work to get the money that we got.
I'd love to see if we had $2 million rather than moving the fence, I'd love to see like a second shift.
Yeah.
Of employees, so that we could just stay open later and have somebody friendly on site.
Yeah.
And say, hey, yeah, of course, go that way, check that out, rather than moving the fence in.
Yeah.
To
So
the
I
top of
just-
the slope.
I just wanted to like readdress that, because it's such a good idea. So many people raised it. It'd be so great to have Randall Park just like a butt North Main. There may be some ways we could have additional entrances, or, all the things that Sherry discussed. But moving the fence is, just like really, unless someone has like $1 million, they want to usually donate to the city expressly for that purpose. Might not gonna happen anytime soon. So just wanted to answer that question. Do you folks on the task force have questions or comments for Annalisa? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm not as familiar with the whole extent of it, but you've mentioned there's a few pedestrian entrances from North Main Street. Do they all have, crosswalks at them, do you know?
The only one that does is the Rochambeau entrance, which definitely weighs really heavily on me. I speaking with like our foreman and just kind of keeping an eye on what's happening. There's also it is like literally the entrance is right by that bus stop.
Yeah.
And I get really worried that our pedestrian gate is like an attractant and drawing people into something unsafe. There's also a bus stop there, so probably more, people are more often visiting the bus stop than they're visiting the burial ground, but it is something that I worry about. So yes, this one is technically Cemetery Street, this is where Cemetery meets North Main, and there's this one, and there's we keep this one blocked in the winter time because there's these big old trees around the greenhouse that are but in the summertime when there's less stormy stuff, we go from that. These two.
And which cross street is that for walking?
It is basically north Evergreen is, so it's not too far from where the actually lives today. So that's like right here. I'm not sure there's actually like a good cross street right at that one.
Right here.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, Grandview, did you say? Yeah. And there's an unintentional opening right now at Evergreen. Where
There is, yeah.
Not a bus, like a truck just went right through that wrought iron fence, so.
And also I got a power pole and it was a hit and run in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Like, we came in the next day and we were like, oh no, that fence is so expensive. And we're so glad that we got hurt, but oh no, that fence is so expensive. So, yeah.
Yeah, luckily no one got hurt, no one was on the sidewalk there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess just like strengthening the connections, the pedestrian access points and creating better crosswalks with curb extensions and better lighting and like, safety improvements like that. I feel like that should be a priority as well.
And the other thing too is that you can kind of see this is a topo map. This section of this is pretty steep slope. So this isn't like great walk in anyway, like this has some steps actually to get up the slope of this one.
Oh, yeah.
This is our flat entrance spot. So this is where you can get in and not have to scramble down.
And then the one at the top, right, that's where the marble steps are, not the top, like the.
Yeah, this is the steps. Yeah.
And that's right by Mr. Bagley's office. Right by your law office is where that, yeah.
Golden State is all.
Thanks for starting out with that.
Jean, did you bring it up?
Yeah, it's a question about snow removal, which is sometimes on the sidewalks outside the cemetery is an issue in the winter. Is that something that the cemetery manages, or does that happen elsewhere in the DPW?
Yeah, we'll sometimes help out if there's like a faster DPW needs, but that's part of the big mobilization, and then my 5 guys do inside the burial ground.
Okay, thanks for raising
Yeah,
that.
that's a good
We
question.
did like that this year, that
Yeah.
the snow that got ignored. Yeah. Any other questions from Lisa or comments? That great is.
It was great.
Yeah, awesome, thank you so much. And like, what an amazing asset as we're thinking about what North Main is and will be, like, to have like so much history and an active growing from there.
I want to just add, like, I can see North Fairfield Ground like out of my living room window, and it's like, it's exciting to have it there as a resource, and I'm excited to hear that you're like trying to do some really good things with it, so thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm biased, but like I genuinely think it's like the coolest place in the city. It's an amazing, amazing place. If you haven't been in and haven't gone on a tour, like please come, or if you want to go on a just private tour, I love having a reason not to look at a spreadsheet. So stop by the office and I will absolutely abandon my work and take you out and show you stuff. So
Awesome, so we can move on to the third agenda item, if the folks could leave that into the record. That was with that.
Discussion and presentation on street lighting at key intersections.
Yeah, and as he gets ready, I'm gonna thank Jean and also Rachel, so they went out and did a whole bunch of drone images as well as some other ways to measure light, which I a little bit that I learned about that. To think about at night, from a safety perspective, what do some of these key intersections look like? And so that we can have some data about what to do about them. And on Zoom, we're being joined by Kyle. He's not actually on Zoom, he's on YouTube. He's out today, but Kyle, who works for us in the council office, our project manager, who helped get some of the lights turned back on in the whatever that was that we did that this fall. Some of them were busted. Deputy Director Pontarelli from Public Property was supposed to be here, but it looks like she is not. So maybe she's also on the Zoom. I know some people have been a little ill and broken lately. So I'll follow up with her afterward, because the street lights are owned by public property. But she's been a real partner in trying to figure it out. And Jane, take it away.
Okay, yeah, so I think my interest in this started kind of with some of the discussions that got used to, over, you know, walking up and down the street and cataloging lights and network and things. And I started looking more closely at intersection lighting, which from a pedestrian safety perspective, to me feels like kind of the most pressing area. So with some help from some Providence Street Coalition volunteers and friends, I did a data gathering exercise, and so this is the result of it. Now, little background on me. This is street lighting and infrastructure is not my area. I have professional expertise in this. I'm an analytical chemist by profession, so I specialize in chemical and physical measurements. If I say anything that's completely wrong, I know some of you have like actual professional expertise here. Feel free to jump in and correct me. I'll do my best with this. So I'm going to jump right in and start talking initially about how light can be measured. And I'm not going to get too sciencey here, but a couple of properties we want to think about are luminous flux and illuminance. Luminous flux is usually measured in a term that Congress is familiar with, which is lumens as the unit. So you'll see like headlights, light bulbs are rated in lumens. That's the light that is emitted from a light source. The luminance is the measure of the quantity of light that lands on a given surface. So lumens emitted from a light bulb or street lamp. Then we measure lux is the unit of the luminance, which is how many lumens land on a given square meter of surface. And to measure that, there are these lux meters, and I brought this in. If anybody wants to play with it and see how bright it is in the room, feel free to pass it around. Feel free to put it on the table if that's boring. So I bought a light meter to do this. It wasn't a terribly expensive one, and so I wanted to make sure that it was giving accurate readings, so I didn't give you a bunch of garbage data. So I worked with some oceanography equipment, and I basically compared the readings it was giving me to the readings of the really high-end meter, and it was pretty consistent within a few percentage points, to the point where I feel like I have confidence that the numbers I'm giving you are real. There are also cell phone apps that will give you lux values. I trust them a little bit less, but that's, you know, if you want to do something, that's something you can do. So to orient you, starting with my Because who knows what like 1 lux looks like, or 20 lux, or 30 lux, like I did before I started this. I'm gonna give you a few values I want you to just kind of keep in your head through this presentation, because these numbers will be relevant as we look at street lighting, to kind of get a sense of like, well, what does that actually mean? So I did a few tests at home. This is the corner of my living room. You can't see it because it's so dark, but the light meter is on this rocking chair. And that string of fairy lights at about 8 feet distance gives us a value of 1 lux. So 1 lux is pretty dim. 5 lux is a candle at about arm's length. And that's an image you can keep in your head as you think about maybe being in a crosswalk, holding a candle and hoping a driver sees you. This will be relevant to them. And 20 lux. So at this point, we have kind of mood lighting, maybe the equivalent of like a 40-watt light bulb on the piano, and the lighting meter on the floor about 7 or 8 feet away. That's 20 lux. So how bright can the crosswalk be? My source for this was the pedestrian lighting primer from the US DOT. These are Federal Highway Administration standards. Again, if somebody knows that there's something more relevant I should be looking at for this, shout it out. But from the research I did, it seems like an intersection crosswalk should be 30 lux vertical vertical lux. That means measured with the light meter pointing straight up toward the street light. And mid-block crosswalk should be 20 lux. Light direction and position actually makes a big difference here. The standard way to measure it seems to be just vertical lux. But if you were designing lighting from scratch and you wanted to make sure the lights were in the right place, you want to think about where the light is in relation to the crosswalk. So in this example here, we have cars moving in this direction. A street lamp in advance of the crosswalk a little bit, so that the light hits the pedestrian in the crosswalk and lights up the side of their body that's facing drivers. If the light is directly over the crosswalk, it's mostly lighting the top of your head and your shoulders, which is not what drivers are looking at. And if the street light is a little bit behind the crosswalk, the pedestrian is backlit, and that's not very helpful for visibility.
Jamie, I'm just gonna super interrupt you for half a second.
Yeah.
Say there's folks on YouTube and Zoom who are saying they aren't seeing the slides progress, and to them, I'm gonna say, instead of us fussing with your situation, it is posted on the city's portal. So folks wanna like just scroll through, you can click through because Claire already put everything on the city's portal. So just to say that out loud for anyone watching.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we collected data a few different ways. One was by drone. So Jordan Herbert, who is here tonight, who is a coalition volunteer, who also worked on our mapping or crash map data project. He generously volunteered his drone and his commercial drone license, did a lot of research to make sure we weren't breaking any laws or FAA regulations.
Thank you.
Even updated his license and upgraded his drone to have modern lighting, so that was all by the way. So we flew a drone over a few intersections, 4 intersections. We only got really usable images for about 3. So I'm going to show you a mix of drone images and then some things overlaid on Google Maps images.
Which, yeah, thank you guys. Just to say that out loud. This is amazing. Continue with that.
All right, so the first one, this is Olney Street and then North Main Street. So the orientation for all of these images is going to be downtown or the south is to your left, north and Pawtucket is to your right. The east side is kind of down, west side up. And as we go through these slides, we're going to work our way toward the north from Olney Street up to Pawtucket. So let's zoom in a little bit on this image and see what it showed us, and I'll explain the markups in a second. So this is a nighttime view of Olney and North Main. The crosswalk lighting here is. This is not the best image because the car headlights kind of muddy the picture a little bit, but a few things that you can see is around, the circles are locations of street lights, and if it's not clear, the yellow circles are street lights that work, the red ones are street lights that are not currently on. And you can see most of the lights are not working at this intersection. So you can see around this light, there's kind of an arc of light over here. You can kind of see the extent of what it's lighting. This light over here, you can see quite clearly because there are now car headlights nearby, an area of light and dark. This area over here is mostly lighted by the adjacent parking lot lights, which is not ideal and also, again, not the right direction for light coming from for visibility. We followed up walking around with the light meter and measured the luminance. And so you can see right under the, on the lower right hand corner here, Under this street light, we've got a value of 15, it's about half of what it should be, but it's the best we have in this intersection. Right nearby, we get a 3, because this light is pointed this way and actually does just about nothing to light this crosswalk. We got a 1 over here under this light that's not on, a 3 out here. So for the most part, we have one crosswalk that's about halfway lit. And everything else is kind of in that range between holding a candle in front of your face or a very, very dim string of fairy lights. This is a very dangerous intersection in terms of lighting, because if you're pedestrian here, you're not very visible. Next image, so this is the mid-block crosswalk in front of Whole Foods, and this. The main entrance to Whole Foods is here. This is got a little, I think there's a bank down here and the Starbucks. This crosswalk, at some point, I think was recently relocated. It used to be on this section, right? So there's a light here and actually a pretty good value. It's pretty close to what it should be. On this side, we've got 2 lights. They're both pretty far from the crosswalk, and unsurprisingly, we get a value that's not that high in the crosswalk. So again, lights are functioning here, but the positioning is bad. I will say there is a new signal, new pedestrian signal here. And I believe this is city property, the push button flashing. Is that?
Yeah, that's ours.
Yeah, that's that is very nice to have. So maybe do anything to do with that.
That's
Yeah,
me.
it was a write-up, right?
Oh, was it? Okay. Right up.
We did the speed bumps.
Yeah, you heard that.
Okay. Great collaboration. So the way I Main Street, this is maybe one of the best images we got. So again, a few lights that are not working. You can see pretty clearly here because there's no car headlight nearby at the moment. Drone photo of the spot. You can really see the boundary of what this street light is able to do. There's an area of light here, and past it, it's really dark. This light does a pretty good job lighting up that intersection. I promise I'll slow down as we go, so this doesn't take like 45 minutes. I'm sorry, I'll speed up rather. Yeah. Okay, so again, a few half decent values, a pretty good one over there, but again, this light cannot light the side of the intersection. So this is, one of our dangerous deadly crosswalks and almost no light. And that's the trend in a lot of this intersection. I consider these areas effectively unlighted. This light can't get all of these crosswalks. This entire river delta roads over here cannot be served by a light that's pointed this way. So if there's an intersection like this, we turn on the lights that aren't working, but adding more lights is really the only way to fix this. And that's going to be the trend that we go. One bright spot in this though is the Whole Foods parking lot. Where we found the highest values that we saw pretty much anywhere. By the way, Rachel helped with a lot of on this end of the street, a lot of these measuring values. All right, so the Whole Foods parking lot. Just a shout out to Whole Foods for having these massive poles in the parking lot. And I understand that these lights would probably not be appropriate for street lighting because obviously it's not the right kind of light, but it just shows that you put 6 lights on a pole, everything is really bright. One thing I do like about that, that I have seen as a strategy for street lighting is some of the lights are down low and have a better chance of, because they're not coming straight from above, better chance of kind of collaboratively lighting the pedestrian body.
Pedestrian scale.
What's that?
Pedestrian scale.
Pedestrian scale lighting, and that might be something to think about if we're at a point where we have funds for redesigning lighting. Okay, for Leonard Way and North Main, this is that little road between Doyle and Branch Ave. All the lights work, none of them are anywhere close to where they should be. And again, it's an intersection with basically just ambient light from parking lots and headlights.
And these are your parking lots, right, Mr. Bradley? Yeah. So
That's okay. There, you can put up some more lights.
Thanks.
Well, I do have motion lights.
Yeah, you have motion lights, yeah.
Okay, so we'll just wave our arms. Okay, Branch Ave and North Main. This is one of the worst ones, I think. Partly, I know you can barely see, right? Let's zoom in a little bit. So that entire intersection, one street light, basically. Even if these two were working, which they're not, they're too far away to do anything. And you can see again very clearly the boundary of the pool of light that this light casts. It's really not even enough to light this entire crosswalk. You can see we've got a 12 here, which is compared to a lot of the street pretty good, but like actually by objective standards pretty bad. And this is where we started to get some zero value. It's not to say no light at all, but below the detection limit of my light meter. And dimmer than the string of fairy lights in my living room. So. Oh, get to a point here. I want to also say, if we have a chance to redesign this, I think, this intersection has 3 crosswalks, meaning pedestrians want to get from here to here, have to cross 1, 2, 3 times and risk their lives 3 times instead of once, which is not something I agree with. But if we're going to keep that, and if we have a chance to upgrade lighting at some point, I think we should light this stretch as well. And the reason for that is because that's 6 lanes and I see pedestrians crossing there all the time. Because if it turns out if you ask people to cross 3 times, they're gonna go the shortest route.
And that one that is barely lit too, is in the right turn channelization, that's not even part of the signal. So like, vehicles have to yield, they have to keep pedestrians in yield.
Yeah, we have more to say about this and Rachel Park is going with this. So, yeah, so we have a slip lane here. There's no light. Your car headlights are only pointed at the pedestrian when you're about here, just to say when you're about to hit him. Pedestrian has very little chance of being seen there. Your best strategy there is to walk very carefully and wait for litter in the car because that crosswalk is doing you no good. So Rachel and I made the crossing here. We measured the zero value over here. We crossed back onto this island. We pressed the pedestrian signal to cross the rest of the way. About 20 seconds later, while we were waiting, we heard a crunch behind us. And it was these guys crashing into each other on the crosswalk that has no lighting. Now, I can't say that that's entirely because of the lack of lighting, but I do think it illustrates the point that, if somebody in a car doesn't see an SUV in front of them in a dark crosswalk, like what chance does a pedestrian have? Now, these guys jumped back in their cars and sped off. Basically, I think they took like one look at the 2 weirdos and like fluorescent visibility lights, like something's going on here, we gotta get out of here. And that was like funny, but it was also kind of a reminder that like there was damage here. I picked that piece of plastic off the ground,
Yeah, there was a crunch and there was debris, and then they ended up.
That's a different accident, but yeah, I did have some pieces of car that I was gonna bring in to make a rhetorical point, decided like I could spare you all that. But I think the point, and my takeaway from that is, we're dealing with a lot of hit and runs on this street and around the city, and a lot of people are driving around without insurance, a lot of people are driving around intoxicated, a lot of people have incentives to flee the scene. And this seems like a situation where these 2 guys who like somebody had a claim to make to insurance if everybody was above board, and possibly nobody had insurance, and so they said, let's just get out of here. I don't know. But that's kind of a reminder of some of the additional hazards that you face as a pedestrian. I think a lot of it, we're responsible drivers and careful citizens kind of think in terms of like, well, everybody's doing the right thing, and a lot of people are not.
Rachel, are you about to?
Just to be clear, this was not a hit and run, like they both got out of the car.
They
got out of the car, they spoke
consent.
with each other, and then they mutually left.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also just to point out, like, there are businesses that people go to on foot right across from there, so Nikki's Liquors is there, there's the Chipotle and the.
So I parked at the Chipotle parking lot this morning to go to the Vision Zero thing, because I wasn't sure where to go, and walked from there. Tried to figure out what my quickest way to get over to the burial ground was, realizing that there was no actual crosswalk where I wanted to cross over there. There was no traffic coming, I crossed, whatever.
Yeah.
But then on the way back, I used that crossing just to see what it was like. Thankfully, I got the walk signal as I was coming across, so I didn't have to wait, which I know is not normal. But then as I was turning back onto the branch, a car was flying up the turn lane to try and take that lane, and that's there.
Yeah.
Actually, look out my office window at.
Oh, yeah,
so
that's
that was
different
right
office
there. So I look at this intersection a lot and I drive and do it every day, and it's gnarly.
It's a bad spot.
It's really, really rough.
Even in the day.
And and it's nerve wracking too, because a lot of folks who come in, even from the main entrance, don't drive into the burial ground, they walk in, so. We also have people who cut through the circle, which you're not supposed to do, so people will speed through the circle, which is really scary. And
Sometimes it's me run out.
I feel like this would be a great practical thing to do, to just close the channelization of this right turn. So it's like, if you go back a slide, like, most cars can probably just turn right.
And you're right.
I'm sure.
So like, if we could just
Oh,
close off
make
that
it a
channelization
right turn.
and like close it, like, as a pilot, but especially until the lighting is addressed, like, that's nice.
Yeah, I would definitely be agree with that. All right, let's move on. So heading north, Rochambeau and North Main. We have, again, basically one light in this whole intersection. There's nothing over here. There's one light over here, but it's too far south to be helpful in crosswalk. And again, you can kind of see near the light, there's some lighting near the street light. This street is too wide for a single light to light the width of it. And so by the time you're halfway across, you're just getting ambient lighting from headlights and buildings. Third Street in North Main, this is the next one to the north. This one at least has two lights that are kind of in the intersection. Unfortunately not super well placed with some of the crosswalks. This one in particular. So this one kind of ranges from about 50% as bright as it should be to virtually nothing in some spots. Smithfield and North Main from a lighting perspective, I have to say is the worst one because there just is not a single light anywhere near this intersection. And that includes, you know, I went home and I scoured Google Maps to make sure I wasn't missing anything. There's nothing up here. There's one about here off the frame. But it's just a very, very dark spot where no lights, right? And 10th and North Main, again, we have one light that really can't light, you know, I don't know what that is, 70 feet of crosswalk. They're all working here, but there just is not adequate lighting in the spot. And all right, so this is technically out of Providence, so clearly a different lighting jurisdiction. I'm not even sure if it's relevant for the conversation today. One of the reasons I decided to include it was I had already basically made up the slide that before I realized it wasn't in Providence, but the other reason, no, there's actually some collision here. So there is only one light in this intersection, but an interesting thing I saw here is we got a value of 34, and that's the first one I've seen in this entire corridor that meets the federal standard of 30 lux. So one of the things that came up in our conversations, Stu, you had said that the lighting on North Main was initially at 50% brightness, and
Yeah.
you got it turned up to 75%.
Yeah, so Deputy Director Pontarelli has increased the light, like, because we talked about this, there were a number of lights that were out. I walked up and down and like took notes which ones were out, and many of them got put back on, obviously not all of them. And that we talked about why. And then she also just increased the brightness. I do that, like she's just in her office, but you know, it's an hour, which is not what it is. This was right before this, so they were increased before this. I think that many of them are at like 75%, but she's not here today, so I can confirm that, but they are like adjustable.
Yeah, so if that's the case, if they're all at 75% now, I'm wondering if this one is at 100% because it's not in Providence. Okay, maybe those things a little bit differently, and maybe if that's all we need to do is turn them up. I mean, I realize again we need to do more than that because there aren't enough lights like it should be, but for the ones that aren't bright enough, like maybe turning them up to 100 fixes part of the problem. I think, Sue, one of the concerns you had said that there was concern about still light in adjacent residences, right?
Yeah, so one thing that was brought up, and it wasn't particular in North Main, but when I asked about turning it up, is sometimes when we turn up the lights, there's like neighbors will complain because suddenly the light is like in their house or in their yard. It does also like less important than North Main Street, but it does also have to back up wildlife and stuff like that in the city. So there are other considerations that are maybe less relevant on street level, but yeah, there have been many places. If it gets too bright, and Jess looks like were you about to say? Oh no, that was just
Okay, I'll touch on still light a little bit more in a second. I want to make one as opposed to wrapping up here. So I also wanted to ask the question of like, well, if there aren't street lights, like how good a job do your car headlights do of lighting up the pedestrian? If we're trying to get everything to like 30 lux, how close does the car have to be before things were that bright, and it turned out very, very close. I was really surprised that I stretched 150-foot tape measure out in front of my friend's car, and I just walked with the light meter
Oh, wow.
to see where I got different lux values, and at 20 feet, we were already down to 20 lux. 50 feet, 5 lux, so that's again the candle brightness, 100 feet, very light brightness, 1 lux. So basically, car headlights do not fill in the gaps when we don't have street lighting. To get the level of visibility we're looking for, a driver needs to be right on top of the pedestrian, and your reaction time at 20 feet or less is close to nil, particularly if you're going at 45 miles an hour or however fast people are traveling in this corridor. And then just on the topic of the still light and the sort of the possible argument for not turning the lights up all the way. So still light or light trespass is the light that's not lighting the area that we want to light, the street light, but that's going into adjacent residences and windows and up into the sky. From this exercise, I am convinced that this is not an issue on Main Street. You saw those kind of boundary arcs of the pool of light coming from these lights. These are modern LED lights, and they seem to actually do a pretty good job of casting a cone of light that goes straight down. So based on my analysis, I feel like we could turn the lights up to 100%, and we're not going to get complaints about people who can't sleep at night because, 50 feet away, you're getting basically candles like minutes. I don't think that would have anybody up. All right, so just a few quick conclusions. We have serious lighting maintenance issues on North Main Street. The number of lights that are not on is astounding. The ones that, I showed in the presentation, the ones at intersections, there were lights out up and down the corridor, and I know that this is outsourced, and I think you know more about this than I do.
Yeah, I can talk about it.
Yeah, I have questions about just sort of the process of how this, like how things get reported, how they get noticed, and kind of like what expectation there is with the contractor in terms of how quickly things get addressed. But even where lighting is functioning on the street, they're not bright enough. So I think that's something that we should try to see if we can quickly address. As it was said, still light is not a problem. And if we're able to do any future redesign, I think we should really think a lot about the positioning of lighting and make sure that we're designing lighting that's not just kind of legacy infrastructure from decades ago, but something that's really designed to protect pedestrians on the road as it's used today. And finally, I want to encourage people to think about on the ground data gathering for looking at infrastructure. I learned a ton from this exercise, just from, I've lived within sight of the street for years, but just from like spending the time walking around, looking at lights, kind of cataloging them, taking measurements, watching how the light interacts with the area. There's so many incredibly dark spots. I think to learn more about the street and what it needs, I think we need to all kind of think about spending more time walking around, observing and reporting what we see. So that's all I've got. If anybody has questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. That is like the amount of work you put into this is stunning. So I also just want to say thank you. That's amazing. And just 2 quick notes. One is the road safety assessment. Part of the purpose of that is to get people out on the road. And so like that will be us whoever wants to join for the task force, so no requirement, as we're able, like walking up and down, North Main. And so getting approximate to it, but, so one, I like to say that. And then 2, just a quick thing about the lighting. So the city owns the streetlights. This was a journey that Kyle, who's on the Zoom, and I went on. Mr. Badway actually flagged this for me in October after Vondra was killed on North Main, that intersection was so dark, and we only picked up like what had happened because of the lights that are on his property. And so I walked up and down North Main to catalog which ones were out. The lights are, so they're owned by the city, and then we have third-party contractor, Prism, who manages those lights for us. And I will say this on the record, I was pretty horrified that part of the process of them fixing the lights was that I had to walk up and down North Main Street in the dark and tell them which ones were out. Like, that is like kind of shocking, and I'm really disappointed in that.
So
And
it's so proactive.
I don't know, and that's gonna, they're gonna come up for a renewal at some point this year, to the finance meeting, which I also serve on, and there'll be a lot of questions.
Can we get a copy of the existing contract? Because I've been wanting to see that, just to understand like what they're on the hook for.
I'm looking at Aaron to see, can we get a copy of that? Is that, a possible thing, the prison contract?
Yeah, I think we should be able to.
Okay, I'll check in with you and Kyle afterward, because Kyle let me dig in on this a little bit too. Yeah, because I was pretty surprised at those, and Amanda Pontarelli, who's the deputy director of public property, was really helpful, she was family members, she was like really proactive, some of the lights, the actual poles are, wait, I'm gonna get this wrong. There was something where like Rhode Island Energy had to do maintenance on some of the poles, so some of the ones that we highlighted that didn't get turned on right away. It was because Rhode Island Energy had some process that like was taking forever. I was like calling the lobbyists, you guys, I was like, this is anyway. And so that is a real thing. And so Amanda also, or deputy director Pontarelli turned them up, knowing that this was a concern, but that this seemed like a good follow-up for Aaron. And I and Kyle to do with deputy director Pontarelli about like, these are obviously still an issue.
Yeah.
And is in the city's, you know, is at least partly in the city's control, so.
Is your understanding though, for all the lights that aren't on, that like there is a process and somebody's working on it, even if it's taking longer than?
I get the sense for the ones, unless there's new ones that turned off since October when I did my survey, which I'll check my list, because I have like a list of the numbers, all the poles had a number on them, which I did not know until I walked up and down, so you can see a number. And for these, this is great that they're on this map, because Kyle figured out that you can also zoom in on Google Maps and see most of the numbers without having to like actually walk the street if you know what intersections they're at, which is really helpful for not having to like stick your face out into traffic like I did. And so my sense from that was that the city fixed the ones they could fix, and that there are the ones I highlighted, and that there was some sort of work with Rhode Island Energy to fix the others. But there could be some that turned off since then, so I'll.
One additional thing I'll say is all of these images are on the Providence Streets Coalition's website. We have a North Main Street lighting page that's been live for a couple of days now. Again, thank you, Jeremy. So if you want to refer anybody to those images, who's responsible for this, it's one easy place to just kind of scroll through.
Oh, great.
What's working, it's not, they want to go through the PowerPoint.
Okay. And this PowerPoint is on the city's portal, so anyone who wants to dig on it, this later, it's on the city's portal. Yeah, Lieutenant Brennan.
So, back when I first got hired here, something that we used to do on Sunday nights, you told me, which everyone hated, called lights and depressions, right? So
Yeah.
if you had a post, you had to go out, big potholes, street lights around, and there against electric, was pretty fun about getting that fixed. Usually, I think you got away with that, we got to this prison companies, I think the assumption was, I wasn't part of how that went down, and I think the assumption was they could be controlled overall, and maybe a way to know it's working.
Yeah.
I think that's probably gonna be with it, but if you want an inventory, I'll have a third shift, begin this week.
Oh, that'd be terrific.
So we'll talk about lines, we'll do all of it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's definitely a problem though that's bigger than just North Main Street.
Oh, yeah.
I've been, since I started paying attention, it's like everywhere in the city, and if there isn't a system for proactively noticing stuff, if it's all down to UD 311 requests, like, I think that's not working.
Yeah.
It's almost at the level that, like, I feel like I can't submit requests for everyone I see, it's just like too many, you know?
Yeah. And it feels like we're paying a third party contractor, that there should be proactive monitoring of this. It shouldn't be that every single one has to be a 311 request, that there should be some way for them to know. Especially if like in the past, it was that we had you guys going out and doing that. If we've lost service, now we're paying a different contractor to do that, what are we getting? I don't know. Lots of questions. Do other folks have questions for Jamie or comments around the table, and then we'll do Robert?
I do just want to note in the raise grant application, safety is one of the top like merit criteria, and I do talk about lighting in that area, and that's something that I would want to see addressed, because I know it's a problem. So this is helpful in like backing that up. Yeah. So thank you guys for doing all that.
The other thing that's really helpful, and maybe extra funding like that could be helpful, is some of the areas you pointed out, there just are no lights. And so it's not that they're not bright enough, they just don't exist. So like Amanda could only fix the ones that like exist, but it seems like there's a lot of intersections where there's.
And I think like if we don't have lights at all, like the standard is that the lights on the crosswalk should be 30 watts, but I think that assumes that there should be lights on the crosswalk, right? That the crosswalk should be lighted at that brightness, so I think that's something that should be figured out, and again, the raise grant may be the best chance for getting funding for it. I don't know if there's any way to find sort of more emergency funding in the
Yeah.
meantime, but.
I
Was
talked
that,
to
what is the typical process for getting lights where we don't have them at all?
I have no idea, and so I'll ask Amanda that, and I don't know how much lights cost, like, if we installed a new light, is it? I'm not even gonna speculate a number, like, maybe it's totally affordable, and that's something we can make a request on, or that's something I can try and spend neighborhood money on, I don't know. I'll be real, I have no idea how much it costs, so that's something I can look into. And, yes, the power there, is there,
Yeah, on the state level, I know we coordinate with Rhode Island Energy to install any new lighting.
Question, oh wait, are we just doing?
oh yeah, let's do a round, and then we'll go to the questions. Unless there's no more questions or comments, Rachel.
I mean, this is just a comment. I think I felt like this was a really helpful lens to consider it. I think, you know, again, Jamie and I talked about this a little bit, but this is a bit of a fish and water thing for me because it's like, you know, walking all around Providence for over a decade, I realized I was not thinking about lights at all. Like it didn't even occur to me that things were too dark. But in looking at this, like starting to think about where incidents are happening, like what even day, or we're on Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
So on Monday night, I was walking home and I walked, might have been walking to Whole Foods, I'm not sure. But I crossed, Olney back here, which is your intersection. You know, so crossing Olney, going along North Main, kind of from the benefit area. And, you know, I had the light and this driver did not slow down at all. He's making his right turn and he just went right through. And, you know, once he was in the crosswalk, he looked at me. So I know he saw me at a point. And again, I'm not used to thinking about light at all. So like, I would have assumed that it was obvious that I was trying to cross because I'm pretty assertive when I'm trying to cross streets, but again, looking on here, that's one of the ones where we had a value of a 1. So like maybe he just actually did not see. But it is, you know, it was a crosswalk with the crossing signal at the time. So, you know, like maybe that, like, again, I think this lens is helpful to start thinking about, like, is that part of what's happening when they go through? Are they really just not seeing us some of the time?
I mean, I think we need to deal with the fact that there have been a lot of collisions at night, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, we're seeing that as a national trend. Maybe you saw there was a piece in the New York Times a month or 2 ago that had a lot of coverage on just this issue. I think it's a problem not just here, but everywhere. And I think we're negligent if we don't find a way to at least make things lighted enough that drivers have a chance of seeing you, right?
You just had a hand or you just?
No.
Okay. Yeah, either.
I think that both the increase in the traffic stops that Lieutenant Brown spoke about, and then this lighting presentation, both very sort of important aspects of increasing pedestrian safety. I am curious if anyone has, in terms of the accidents that have been either fatal or these terrible injuries with pedestrians, is there any correlation in terms of what happened in those cases? Were the drivers, were they all at night? Were they mostly at night? And also, is there any data collected? I don't know if we're allowed to, about, was the person using their phone? Were they essentially a taxi? Like, there's so many things happening, I think, in our culture right now. So lots of people are driving for work, whether they're delivering food or they're a taxi service, Uber, Lyft, whatever. Also, people are using their phones for 100 different reasons. And I'm just curious whether that is in any way information we can gather, or is there anything to correlate there?
Because I've tried to get this data before, and eventually there was a data set that the Providence Streets Coalition got. Like I made a public records request to write a few years ago for collision data and wasn't provided it. I think you might have seen articles about, I guess many of us have done that. But there are portals like that in other states. Like Massachusetts has a site that you can go to that has collision data that includes things like cell phones and whatnot. So like there are models for how to do that. But it's been harder to access here. And the city eventually shared a data set that people worked with. I think you know more about than I do, but it's just from seeing like there are states that build this for you to make it easy, instead of having to find it
Seems like
yourself.
important, relevant
Yeah.
information.
Well, for North Main Street, I will say, I have a public, and we exchanged some emails about this. I have a public records request in, asking for actual crash reports with redactions to protect personal information for 13 years worth of crashes on North Main Street. My hope is that if we get that, we can answer some of those questions and try to say at this intersection, there's a lot of people making this left turn that's not set up right, or, kind of find some patterns that will help us make decisions at specific intersections as we go forward.
So I will say that that is part of the road safety audit process, so the consultant is likely doing that. Usually the kind of, even from the MassDOT portal, like those don't usually go into like all of the specifics of the crashes that the police reports do, but if you do a road safety audit, that's when you get like the actual police reports, and like you have to comb through those and then get the like behavior trends and all of that kind of stuff. So that hopefully we will get some of that information and it'll be all summarized through the road safety audit process.
Am I doing something redundant here, or is that already underway?
So as part of the RSA, we typically we'll get 5 years of data. Fatals will look back even further, and that's kind of typically the practice. I think in terms of the open record request, you might get a response saying it won't be shared, and that's just the existing policy at this time involved in that. So this is kind of a way to get that information at doing the road safety assessment.
So in regards to the data, like the example you mentioned about cell phone data. So, I think I can summarize by saying something I'm probably in trouble for, but you have to, before an officer is going to put something like that in a police report, he's going to need, she's going to need something to support that. If you're going to write the summons for something like cell phones or something, you have to have some evidence to support that. Very, very often you don't. In some cases, though, you have a serious injury accident, you have a fatality or something like that. You and I spoke about this, right? So the way the police department works is you have a small traffic bureau. And those people are over there because they want to do traffic work. They're very motivated, they're into it. And a lot of those officers in traffic have additional training and experience in accident construction and stuff like that. In most cases, those officers only handle serious accidents. So you're going to get a more in-depth view. They may see cell phones, right? You might look at stuff like that. They're going to look at vehicle data, what do they call that? The CVR program or something like that. We do that, but we don't do that in every accident. So it depends sometimes who goes. If it's just a post person that's sent to the accident, listen, I'm gonna be honest with you, cops don't want to take accident reports. And a lot of them, it's more like the basic information like the insurance company figure out. But it's depending upon what happens. So you're gonna get a lot more information in a serious accident. There are some accidents where they capture video. There's dash cam video that a lot of people are using now. Sometimes we get lucky and they capture something like that. But as far as getting a lot of data that way, we're not really reporting it. Only because you have to be able to support it. And I talked to you in court, but here's why I say things. Providence typically doesn't send a city solicitor. They don't have a lot of people to support the officers of traffic terminal. And I was in this position when I was in patrol and doing a lot of this stuff. So the officers are real hesitant because you're usually going up against somebody. If there's an accident involved and you write a summons, most people will hire an attorney or the insurance company because they want to get rid of that. We sometimes don't set the officers up well enough because they don't have a city solicitor. Some cities and towns do. I understand it's cost, right? And it's city solicitor's office is always looking for more money for other things. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes related to this. And that may be why you're not able to get the data right away, because it may just not be tabulated. You might not have.
And just to share the article, so thank you for that. The article that Jamie mentioned earlier in the New York Times also discussed some of the cell phone usage of one of the things that's happening in cars now is there's more screens and there's more things to distract drivers as well. And I think if we're reading the same article, that was highlighted as one of the reasons too, because across the country we're seeing increases in traffic incidents, and all of the screens and lights and things you need to touch has been brought up. And it could also be the Lyft drivers and the Uber drivers who are touching, you're paying attention to things that aren't just the road. But that was, I can share on that New York Times article, full sentence. Awesome. Any more questions or comments around the table? Cool. And then folks, I did sign in. I'm gonna grab this. I'm gonna use the list first of folks who signed in to get public comment, and then I will go to other folks, or questions. Tyler. If you could just state your name for the record, it's written here, but that's just helpful.
Sure, my name is Tyler, and I'm a member of PUN, which is the Providence Network. I'm actually a constituent of Sue, so glad to be here today. I've got a couple of things to say. First, congrats on moving forward with the Vision Zero. It's a very lofty goal, a good goal, and best of luck.
We're gonna get there.
Doing policies to get there, and I'll be rooting for you and helping you as much as I can. Jamie, that was a really awesome presentation. I wasn't expecting that, and I'm like gonna go share it with my friends this weekend of presentation. It's very, very interesting. A couple comments that I wanted to make regarding North Main Street is that I would encourage use of infrastructure solutions. I mean, light is very good in the very short meantime. I think illuminating all the players, whether it's cars, bikes, pedestrians, etc., is a good thing that everybody can see each other. But I think at the end of the day, what's going to create safety is infrastructure. So, you know, the great comment about removal of the slip lane is a great infrastructure design change that can have the ability to create, you know, immediate diminution of cars' ability to inflict damage, and just an increase of physical barriers between cars and other forms of transportation, bikes, pedestrian, etc. I think when we don't acknowledge the reality of cars being very, very dangerous, they're getting bigger, they're faster, people are distracted in driving them, and you know, as we saw with the crash while you were doing your study, you know, people, whether they don't have insurance, they don't care, you know, I see car drivers that just are selfish in how they operate in the world, whether it's with other cars or pedestrians, etc. So I think that you know, to kind of twist on a famous quote is, you know, it's the cars, stupid, it's the cars. You know, we have to address the cars and how they are interacting with the rest of the world. So I encourage infrastructure solutions to do that. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is, and Jamie mentioned it at the beginning, is there was a recent death and a fatality, one of many in the past year. And I wanted to talk about that not being an accident, that's violence. And the reason I know that is because if all we have to do is make a policy choice change or a design change, and that's a choice, then that's violence and not an accident. An accident is something that occurs through happenstance or, you know, a misguidance. But if all it takes is a choice, then that's violence. So I would encourage us to make changes now. That way we don't have to deal with another act of violence for our friends, neighbors, and community members. So thanks for having me today.
Thank you, Tyler. The next person is Mr. English.
Hi, my name is Mike English, and I'm in Sue's district as well. I liked your presentation. Some of the things that I had looked at, I actually mentioned the last time I was here, was, and personally, I think the city doesn't want to spend as much money doing new rewiring and all that. You could pay for the same type of lighting if you're putting new lighting down the street with solar. It's giving you just as much of a strength to a light to light up that street. That way you didn't have to worry about anybody putting lines up, connecting it, maintenance it. It's just about changing a bulb and that's about it. And also probably what I've read is what the Lieutenant read. Actually could send to the department which one's out and which one's not, without having patrolmen actually waste their time looking at lights all day long. They got a little better things to do with catching speeders. That said, I also remember when Colonel Stone was around, he never wanted to get rid of red lights on his cars. Everybody says red lights are, you know, death traps to the troopers that were on the road, because they have people who just like zone into the car and hit them on the cars. So my thing was, and there are a few cities out there that do it, is actually have a white probe inside the red light. So when the red light turns, it's a blinking white probe in the red light. So they actually pay attention to what the red light changes to. And also if you're zoning out and it is a red, that probe actually acknowledges that light being changed. Now, as far as cars going bigger, I had a 1960 Caddy. I hate to tell you, it was a tank. It's nothing about a car, it's about the driver and realizing the responsibility that you got. Our kids today aren't being taught that they got a weapon behind. When I was told when I was a kid, that was worse than a gun in our hands as we drove. These kids aren't being told what the responsibilities are. It starts with our house. It doesn't start with infrastructure. It starts with how you teach your kids how to drive, how you teach your kids how to use your vehicles. Then you go from there to lighting. Then you could say possibly how your streets are. But we're catering to a culture that we shouldn't be catering to. We should just teach them how to drive a car. At no way did I ever get taught growing up, if I killed someone, I'd leave them on the side of the road. It just didn't happen. To me, I think that's where our psyche is kind of getting misguided. If we taught our kids while they're in high school how dangerous a car really is, no matter if it's from 1960, 1980, or right up to the present day, those cars all speed. And when they hit you, they don't joke around. And for a kid not to understand that, when they get into adulthood, they still don't understand it. And that's the crucial part of stopping most of these accidents, coupled with maybe lighting. And as again, with some of the lights that we do have to make it more able to stick out to a driver that's going 60 miles an hour down the road in the middle of the night, not ready for a light to change. You know, so that's it.
Thank you so much.
Does anybody know how expensive that is to put those like flashing strobe things on the red lights?
It comes with the light, so you'd have to buy the whole thing.
That's what we
There's no add-on.
I'm not sure about that.
That might be something, but it's a good idea if it's feasible.
Mel.
Yes. Hello, I'm Mel. I'm also with Hunt. I also live in Sue's district. I also with the Providence 48-hour film project, which is a local film festival. And we have students that come to my home studio that use the art line. I use the art line. And I don't use it at night anymore. So I'm really appreciative that people are researching this. I definitely couldn't go around in the dark because I would absolutely not be able to see. So I want to say, just like stay on track with this, keep searching for solutions that increase the safety of North Main. It's not just one thing. There's a lot of things that are contributing to this problem. And so we can solve some of them, and then we've got to go, okay, that's solved, and keep building on it. So that this area is really great. I mean, we've got this great, I just found out on North Main burial ground and how awesome it is, and I say we're taking that. Yeah, and I really worry about my kids. They're from the med school. They obviously don't travel at night, but still knowing and seeing those things really stops them from using transit, from using the streets. They're very afraid of the buses right now in general, and North Main does not help, and a lot of them use that to get home. So I just want to say thank you for tackling this problem and just keep working on it, because together we'll make this better.
Thank you, Mel. Appreciate that. And yeah, let's connect your students, because you had met interns.
I have a med student. They're awesome. I love med school.
Yeah. Super fun. Jeremy.
Hey guys, my name is Jeremy. I worked very closely with Jamie on a lot of capturing the images for the drone. I was very happy to do that. I actually live just over the border in Pawtucket, right near Ocean State Job Lot. I don't have too many more things I want to add from what Jamie already said. But certainly, I think diving in a bit more into the contract that we do have with that one contractor regarding what are kind of the service level agreements on how long does it take to fix lights and, you know, what's the procedure? I think that's one thing. One thing I did try to do, and I was telling Jamie a bit about this, is looking at what some other cities are doing as well. And so two great examples I found are the cities of Chicago and LA. They both utilize contractors who have smart monitoring systems. So that way, the moment the light is out, the contractor knows and they can send someone out, and there doesn't need to be that kind of back and forth saying, hey, what lights are out? And we're telling, you know, the contractor as a city what's going on. So, the other thing I was gonna say, I think to the counselor who asked about crash data kind of at night and things like that, on the crash portal on Providence Street Collision's website, we have kind of a bunch of different lenses on the crash data. One of the things we do look at is time of day. So certainly, you know, feel free to look at the website to kind of, that's one of the lenses to get kind of more info. And the one thing I did want to mention that another person in the audience mentioned kind of was about vehicles. I mean, certainly SUVs, vehicles are getting bigger. And one of the biggest problems is the ability actually to see specifically, you know, when something is only a few feet in front of you. There's all these videos online of these small children, maybe 5 or 6 feet in front of a large SUV. It's completely impossible to see the child. And where that's especially important is not just for a child, but the most vulnerable of our society, people with disabilities. So imagine someone who's in a wheelchair, they're struggling across North Main. There's maybe not a median for them, so they have to hurry as much as possible to get across the street. There's inadequate lighting, and so you're relying on the SUV, and then you're also relying on the SUV to be able to see them. So just to kind of also touch upon what he said, the need for infrastructure to serve the people, that way to change the behavior that is most important. So
Thank you, appreciate that.
Just two quick follow-ups.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like, Bren, you were saying like you heard maybe we do have the smart monitoring thing on the.
I don't know, I wasn't privy to that.
I'm sure, but maybe that's something we can find out,
Yeah,
like
we can
if
find
prisons are already getting that data, and if they know that like.
Yeah.
An excuse, if we don't have that, then it's another story.
I just mentioned it because I think we may have assumed that, and that's why we
Maybe,
stopped
yeah.
at internal practice.
But let's find out, I mean, they're modern lights, they were
And
switched
they're
out.
pretty new, they're
so-
switched out like in
yeah.
the last decade.
Yeah, and also on the vehicle design thing, I think one of the issues with SUVs is not just the size, but the height of the hood is so high that your chance of like falling onto the hood versus going into the vehicle is kind of changed, but yeah.
Michael Kenny.
I thought I was just signing that I was in the audience.
I'll say something.
Great job, everyone. It's very interesting. The, I want to raise one issue with unintended raise grant funding, right? I think is, you know, a big concern of owners along the street, whether it's a property owner or a business like ours is we have to maintain access and parking. We can have a whole city block, we have 0 parking. So out front and all that, and so you've seen other parts of the city be either changed or discussed to be bike lane and no parking and so forth, and that's big. So that's like I think for a lot, I can speak for a lot of owners, that would be a non-starter. But that said, we want money improvements and calming and a million things, you know, events in the park, gates, crosswalks, moving food trucks over there, but you know, lots of things that would make us very happy. But being able to cross the street safely, and even if it can be accommodated, like something for bikes that make it better, safer, and all that. But the losing of the parking on the street, I have to say, you know, it's paddling upstream, there's a lot of opposition to be part of it. Anyway, just want to throw that out there. Someone who supports all the work, but needs the parking.
Absolutely, no, I agree, and I'm just gonna clarify, when we're doing these planning studies, we're not coming at this saying that we are getting rid of parking and we are getting rid of the comments. That's not our intention. Our intention is to design roadways that work for everyone, regardless of how you're getting around the city. They are safe for everyone, regardless of how you're getting around the city. And they are enhancing the vibrancy and economic opportunity of their neighborhoods. So that's stuff that we're all taking into consideration whenever we're thinking about these projects,
I
so
want to express a lot of fears of.
I totally understand.
And some maybe, you know, more, hey, they could do something, and some maybe justified, like, hey, some of the stuff that's being bandied about would really, harm us, we want to just start talking about it.
Right.
But I really support the efforts to improve across the board, just in partnership with the owners, you know, that we're interested in, but thank you.
And as Jess mentioned, like this will be a conversation, and I've mentioned to a few of you that I'm happy to meet with the business owners anytime to discuss any concerns. We will make sure. This came up also with the adoption of Vision Zero, a few folks reaching out to me being like, does this mean you're trying to ban cars? And it's like, Vision Zero is the commitment to zero traffic fatalities. And no, it's just like making sure that everyone can get around and everyone can get around safely. I get around in a car. I have my AV, it's parked out back right now, like no shame that people are getting around in the ways they get around. I also hear from a lot of folks, particularly older folks, who can't get around at all because they can't drive anymore and they're afraid to walk. So like wanting to make sure that people have all of the options, including cars and including biking and walking and scooting and being in your wheelchair and pushing a baby stroller and all of the things that you can do those things, which a lot of people right now just can't do. I would love to get around by bike. I won't lie, I'm terrified. I just don't get around by bike. I sold my bike because I'm frankly terrified. I'm not a very large person. It's easy not to see me, like all the things.
And I think a lot of us who are already are biking, but aren't biking everywhere because it's not safe, like make the street safer, I'll bike more places, and then that parking space will be open because my car will be parked there, right? Like the more people are walking and biking, the more parking is freed up.
Last but not least, but then I'll see if anyone didn't sign in, is Alyssa.
Yes, Alyssa Daly, my father and I own Acton Auto Parts.
Yeah.
And we have about, you've probably seen our cars, about 30 drivers on the road per day. One of my concerns about the bike lane, and just getting to that, is that I feel like it would add a problem. I mean, I get that it could add safety, but it could also, more people are gonna be biking. And we have instances, I have a lot of safety meetings throughout the year. Joey is one of our salesmen out on the road all the time, but we also go over the fact that they need to be aware when they're out on the road, because there are pedestrians that don't even go through a crosswalk. They're just walking on the street. And I don't know if that means we need more crosswalks, but my fear is that adding the bike lane, I hope it would make it safer for everybody, but it will increase foot traffic. And that being said, we have drivers out on the road all day, we do 500 deliveries a day, I have to run a business. I'm already concerned with accidents and fatalities that we've had. I just feel like it would add to the problem more than solve anything. So that is my main concern.
Thank you for sharing that input. Thank you. This is all that's signed up for public comment. Does anyone have additional public comment that they wanted to share? Yeah, can you state your name, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm Cameron. I live in East Side. I go to the gym, running over every other day. That's always happened. But certainly I think as soon as I get to North Main, my alertness has to go way up. I would say for sure that I would hope that, you know, as Jack goes, that there will be more mixed use of the street and that it be a street and not a road. I think the fact that it's designed like a highway, and when you have an adjacent highway without a bridge issue is kind of absurd. I don't know if that's really echoed any previous meetings, but I think as someone who uses the street more as someone on a bike, like I am a large person, I am like a very advanced cyclist with no credentials whatsoever, but I think I try to stay off the street as much as possible. I therefore don't really frequent businesses on that street. I think, you know, frankly, it's easier to see the losses, like anything with, you know, it's easier to see losses and we think about negativity, oh, we're gonna lose something rather than gain something else. I would just echo to business owners that like maybe I would shop more on North Main Street if it was some, you know, I shop all the time in Westminster Street because it's super safe. I do the same way to the street. Where do I go at Thayer Street? Half the time I don't want to go to Thayer Street because it's filled with cars. And it's just not as safe. So like I think the fact that the city is attracting, you know, more residents who are young, people, Brown's growing, universities are growing, you're gonna have more people who are gonna walk to areas besides North Main Street. So if you want to really increase your investment, you know, make sure that you provide, you know, Like parking, places, big places where people enter from the street rather than the mall. I think those things should be, active thoughts, but really have any other comments besides, I would say that it seemed that any island that was provided in a crosswalk from your great, presentation, it didn't seem that any of them had, lights themselves, which I assume is because North Main is street and highway, and so we need a clearing space in case a car decides to, out of their own volition, go 60 miles an hour and not get, stopped by a police officer, instead they hit a pole. It's like, well, maybe they shouldn't be allowed to go 60 miles an hour because of infrastructure, so that's my opinion. Thank you for your presentation.
So, did you have one more comment?
Hey, can I make another comment?
Yeah, please.
Hey guys, again, my name is Jeremy. Just kind of off of this point, one thing I also remembered that I wanted to kind of mention as well is specifically, I can't remember which street, maybe it's Smith Street, but just outside the State House, there's that one kind of elevated raised crossing for pedestrians.
Yeah.
And that's a great example of one thing that I think the city has done right and something that could be extrapolated very much to other parts of North Main. That fixes a lot of issues. I mean, certainly speeding on North Main is one issue. That basically works as like a natural speed bump. The other thing is people that might be harder to see, whether it's someone in a wheelchair, someone who's shorter in height, it kind of elevates them as well. And third, I think it kind of helps establish a more clear presence that it's a place for a pedestrian to walk. There's a good amount of parts of North Main I've seen sometimes maybe the striping for the crosswalk is not so clear, but if you have that raised crossing, it's something that kind of, for the long run, it makes it clear that it's a place to walk. And it encourages people, like one of the issues mentioned is there's people that are walking where they shouldn't be, crossing the street wherever. If they see there's a very clear designated place to walk, they'll feel more encouraged to do the right thing and cross at a place that's safe to cross.
Thank you. Anyone else not raise their hand? Mr. English.
Okay, only because of what they said, so I don't really agree with any high making bumps in the roads over North Main. You got a major hospital there. I fell off a building and went paralyzed from the waist down. If I hit those bumps in an ambulance, I wouldn't be standing here or walking today. A lot of people go to that hospital for the same exact reasons and other reasons where they can't be moved like that. For us to do those things would actually put other people in jeopardy while we're saving a couple. I think if we follow, I believe it's land of Florida, they created cameras that the company actually supplied to them. They took a fee off it. The city got millions of dollars, maybe $10 million the first couple of months. And over a course of a couple of years, they reduced the speeding by almost 80%. This was back in the day. I think they've even improved it since then. In Ireland, they did it. When I last went there, speeding and crime and everything else was high. Since they put those video cameras in Ireland, they have less patrolmen and a lot more tickets, a lot more revenue to pay for a lot of infrastructure in Ireland. So we got the technology. To sit there and say you got a ticket, now you got an impact of why you sped. You might realize what's going on. In Kentucky, I believe they reduced their speeding because they not only put cameras next to the schools for the weekdays, but on a Sunday afternoon, if you're speeding beyond that 20 miles an hour, you got a ticket.
Yeah.
You're not speeding next to those places anymore. Those impacts, not just on the weekends, but on the weekends, now will reduce the speed. You don't need to change any road with bumps and make the businesses have a problem or reduce the size of a street because of a couple of bad apples. Route 1 is a major infrastructure. You got 18 wheelers going down that street. That's a business. I think Mr. Badway has trucks coming with his cars. They can't take turns. They need the width of the road. To sit there and reduce that and reduce why he's on that street. And then therefore is it fair to him or any other business that's over there. So to me, I think if with the technology we've got, we should use the cameras, we should give more tickets. Maybe they'll figure it out when they're losing all their money. The tickets, they might not speed and they might not be doing what they're doing. So,
Thank you. Any final comments? Awesome. So our next meeting is going to be Wednesday, March 20th. I'm just checking that date to make sure I'm not lying to you. Yeah, Wednesday, March 20th. The different topics that have been brought up have included the art lines and the improvements or potential improvements coming there. At the last meeting, Larissa brought up, what kind of economic incentives we could be looking at for that corridor. Lieutenant Brown, is discussing potential traffic data. So there's a number of different topics, and we'll make sure that it's not all of them all at once. We're gonna sequence it, don't worry. And then April will be we'll meet for the RSA together. And we'll see if we need a second meeting during April, or if that's our main purpose. That would be a bit. But I want to thank everybody for the presentations today and for like really all this amazing engagement. I feel like we're making progress already, and there's like more to come, and we're really happy to have this open table to have these kind of like hard conversations. So thank you. And can I have I totally forgot. I have to put this on the record. Can someone make a motion to enter this as exhibit 2?
I'll make a motion to enter the crosswalk lighting on North Main Street presentation as exhibit 2.
Excellent. Go to second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Excellent. And can I have a motion to adjourn? Then. Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. We're even to go.
Yes,